Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the teaching series. Today's teaching is going to come out of Matthew chapter 16, and this is a watershed moment in the Gospel of Matthew, or the biography on the life of Jesus done by a guy by the name of Matthew. And in it, Jesus is going to take his disciples to a place called Caesarea Philippi. And this is about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. It sits just at the base of a mountain called Mount Hermon. And the whole conversation that Jesus is going to have with his disciples is predicated on the significance of this location, as this is the only time this location is mentioned in the Bible. Now, we're not going to go into all the background and history and all of that because I just want to look at a brief exchange that Jesus has with Peter, and knowing all of that background information doesn't necessarily help us understand that better. But at some point we'll tackle this story because it's an amazing story and so many people miss the power in the larger story because they don't recognize why Caesarea Philippi was the place that Jesus chose to do this. But Caesarea Philippi looks like this today. So a lot of the ruins would be down over here, and then there's some ruins on the other side of the picture, and it is just an absolutely beautiful area. Well, it is to this area that Jesus comes with his disciples, recorded in Matthew chapter 16, and Jesus asks them this question. He says, "Who do people say that I am?" And they respond, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, one of the other prophets, and Jesus says, yeah, but what do you say? Who do you say that I am? And Peter immediately speaks up and he says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And so he talks about Jesus being the Messiah, the one that people have longed for, and talking about this idea of Son of God is probably not Peter saying you are divine. That would have been really strange for the Jewish people to expect from the Messiah. And it's only later do people really start understanding, oh, Jesus was divine as well. But what Peter has said here is that you have come in the name of God. You have come as a messenger on God's behalf to do something amazing. And Jesus, in that moment, blesses Peter. He says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. So he's got like this seminal, epic moment of blessing that God gives Peter when Peter says, you're the Messiah. And this is the first time that Jesus overtly confirms that he is in fact the Messiah. And they are elated. They've been wondering, they've probably known, but this is like the moment where it like comes to a head. And then on the heels of that, listen to what Jesus says. Verse 21 of Matthew 16. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Just Peter, being Peter here. He's like, you know what, Jesus? I know you just confirmed that you're the Messiah, that you've come in the name of God, that you are representing God. And by the way, I don't think you understand this, and I feel like it is my prerogative to set you in line of the story you're supposed to be walking out. Okay, it's just this, brazen Peter here. And then Jesus turned and said to Peter, verse 23, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Jesus calls him Satan. In one moment, Peter's being blessed, and the next moment, he's being called Satan. Now, however you look at this, there is nothing positive about Jesus calling Peter Satan. There's no redemption around using the word Satan to call Peter this. So the question becomes, what is going on in this moment? Why does Jesus choose to address Peter as Satan here? Because you would think, aren't there other things that Jesus could have said that would have gotten the point across to Peter? And the answer is no. And here's what's going on, is that you can see this going on throughout the Gospels, these biographies that record the life of Jesus, is that the Jewish mentality, the mindset of the coming Messiah in Jesus' time was that the Messiah would come and fight a decisive militaristic battle against a foreign pagan oppressive empire. At this time, it was Rome. The Jewish people are in their homeland, but they are under the boot of Rome. And they are looking for a deliverer, somebody who will rise up and lead a military revolt against Rome, crush them, set up God's kingdom in Jerusalem where God would rule and reign, Israel would be vindicated, and all would be well. And so when Jesus confirms for the first time overtly that he is in fact the Messiah, they are ecstatic. But then on the heels of that, when Jesus goes, oh, by the way, I'm going to die at the hands of the Romans, for Peter, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That is not the storyline. That is not how it goes. Jesus, you're the Messiah. You're supposed to conquer them. You're supposed to take them out. And you're telling us that you're going to die at their hands? And Peter goes to Jesus, this will never happen. Surely, Lord, this shall never happen. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You only have the things of man in mind, not the things of God. And the reason why Jesus has to use this language of Satan is, on the one hand, it's shock therapy. It wakes Peter up to that moment. By the way, this generally works if you call somebody Satan, all right? Not that I'm suggesting that you do that, it just works, all right? But who is Satan in the biblical story? Satan, Has-Satan is his name in Hebrew, the deceiver. That Satan's only purpose is to deceive people, to not understand what God is doing, to look on God with suspicion, to take people the opposite direction of where God wants them to go. And when Jesus calls Peter Satan, he is waking Peter up to the toxicity of his thinking, which basically in Peter's mind is saying this: Jesus, the only way this works out is if you conquer the Romans. This is how you're supposed to act. And when Jesus says Satan, he is basically telling Peter, Peter, you have to die to your expectations of what you think God should do. Because if you don't, you're going to be missing the new thing that God is doing in your midst. Oh, man. Like, that just hits home, doesn't it? I know for me that this has been huge for me. In the last teaching, we talked about Back of the Future, and I shared with you this idea that was really helpful for me on my journey of moving to the greater Nashville area and having no idea why we came here. This is the other teaching that had massive, massive impact on me. And as I shared in the last teaching, without a clue why we were moving to the Nashville area, we came. And in the midst of being here, I got really frustrated, and God's like, back to the future, orient yourself to the past, all of that. But I still had moments where I really struggled. And I remember on one particular day, I'm in by the way, this is my home office, and I'm sitting right there, right next to the camera. And something dawned on me as I was reading this story, as I was thinking through this story, was that one of the things that was holding me up is that I had this idea in my head that because God called my wife and I to move to the greater Nashville area with great clarity, but absolutely zero clarity on what to do, I was basically saying to God, with the same clarity that you called us to leave is the same clarity I expect to know what I'm supposed to do next. And I felt like in that moment, God said to me, Brad, that is holding you back because I don't have to give that to you. In fact, I don't intend to right now. And it was almost as if God was saying, you have to die to that expectation, because if you don't, you're going to hold on to that so tightly, you're going to miss the very thing that I am doing, the new thing that I'm birthing in your midst, that I need you to pay attention to. But if you're going to hold me to expectations you have of what I should do, and if I don't meet that, somehow you're not going to move forward, come on now. And it was like this moment where it was like, oh, and it was like in my own life, I had to die to that expectation. And it was shortly thereafter where all of these ideas started to come forward about the website and the teaching series and the free ebook and all of this. And I felt like it was because I had to open up my hands and not hold on so tightly to what I expected God to do. And I could be open to whatever God was doing. And I could enter into that part of the story. And that's what Peter had to learn at this moment in Caesarea Philippi. It's what I had to learn in that moment sitting right over here. And I believe this is a word for all of us, that we must die to our expectations to experience God's new thing. And I'm not blind to the reality that probably the hardest thing about faith is unmet expectations. That we have this idea of what we believe God should do, and when our reality doesn't match up to our expectations, like this gap is just full of frustration and anger and disappointment. And we're like, God, I don't understand. And friends, there's lots of things that we don't understand. And sometimes I think we can get so caught in thinking like my story is the grand story and everybody else's story should revolve around me, rather than being reminded that God's story sits at the middle. And there are lots and lots of pieces involved, and God is working all of them out. And in due time, whenever that may be, we'll know what we need to know. But in the meantime, if we have certain expectations or certain disappointments where we're like, God didn't meet me in this way, and therefore I'm not going to do this, I feel like we are missing out on the new thing that God is doing, the new thing that is being birthed within us or within our circumstances, that until we die to those expectations, we won't have the capacity to see and receive what God is up to. And again, this is something that as we are in this last week of Lent, like Friday is the day we celebrate Good Friday. It's really kind of like horrible Friday. I mean, it's great that Jesus went to the cross, but it's an ugly day. And for the followers of Jesus, it was deeply disrupting because it didn't connect with their expectations. And it was this sense that they had to go through the process again of going, okay, God, I don't understand what has just happened. Jesus, our Messiah, our Rabbi, our leader, the one who is working on your behalf is going to be put on a cross. What in the world are you doing? And it's only on Resurrection Sunday do they recognize that the only way that Jesus could adequately deal with sin and death is he had to go to a cross. He had to be raised from the dead because that's the only way that people could experience the fullness of life. But that was unexpected. But until we die to our expectations, we won't have the eyes to see what God may be doing in our midst. And so whatever you need to die to, I pray that you're able to do that you just say, dear God, this needs to go. This is what's holding me back. This is where you maybe just need to lament your disappointment, your frustration, and your anger, which is a healthy thing to do because God is big enough to take it. And you just say, God, you didn't meet me here and I'm struggling with this. Help me work through this. Help me die to these expectations so that I can be fully available to what you're doing and I can receive it and experience what you want me to do. So friends, I pray that is true for you as we conclude this Lenten season, as we move towards the cross and the celebration of Resurrection Sunday. We talked about Lent being this place where it's darkness and we're moving towards the light of Easter. And in that darkness, things can be fuzzy, they can be hard, they can be difficult, they can be disorienting. But this is a God who is intimately aware of our circumstances. This is a God who's got his hands on all things. And I pray that you can trust him anew with whatever disappointments you have to work through, anything that needs to die that you can be open to. I pray that you would experience God's new thing in your life. So friends, thanks for watching this. If you're watching this anywhere other than at walkingthetext.com, head over there. There are discussion questions. You can leave comments. If you know someone who just needs to hear this teaching or to jump into the series, share this with them. And friends, may you walk out the text well in your life.